Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Conversations With series for the EEA. Today, we're talking to Dr. Patricio Dalton, a brilliant economist at Tilburg University. He's also the recipient of the Exceptional Teaching Award. Thank you for joining us today, Patricio. It's great to have you.
Thank you for the invitation.
So, firstly, tell us a bit about yourself. What sparked your passion for economics? How did your research interest develop? And what drew you towards teaching development in particular?
Wow, great questions. So basically, my passion for economics grew from a curiosity about the world, and I decided to understand what the term is economic outcomes. In particular, poverty. I was born and raised in Argentina, and it was hard to avoid economic discussions there. The news was constantly filled with debates about inflation and currency crisis and stabilization plans. But for me, it was also personal as well. My parents had a small business, and that was deeply affected by one of these economic policies, the Tablita, introduced by Martinez de Oz at the 80s. So my father experienced a background and never fully recovered. So I could actually experience firsthand how macro instability can shape family kind of destinies. So I grew up in a low to middle income neighborhood in Buenos Aires, and my family always had food on the table, but we were constantly struggling with debts and financial stress. So this inspired me to actually look at also how poverty and worries and struggles that come with poverty affects people's decisions and preferences and beliefs and aspirations. And that basically inspired me to do more research in this, because when I started studying economics, nothing like that was on the table. So we were not studying how poverty affects those kind of fundamentals of decision making. And therefore, when I decided to do my PhD, I focused on this type of issues. And then, of course, why teaching development economics? I like teaching any topics in economics, but of course, it's a natural extension of my research and my personal motivation. So I think the most powerful teaching happens when you bring your research into the classroom, and this is what I try to do. And not only my research, but also my experience, which I think helps the students engage with the subject and respond like energetically and with curiosity. They connect more. So basically, I try to connect my experiences and the research I do with the theory and empirical work they have to study, and this helps, I think, to engage them.
Yeah, I mean, a really inspiring story. So maybe an extra question just for fun. If you could have one conversation with an economist, past or present, who would it be and what would you ask them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So to be honest, I speak a lot with economists at the department, but also at home. My wife is an economist, so I learn a lot from the interactions, etc. But of course, if you tell me who would I like to talk to, well, I think I would rather talk with people who live through the economic struggles every day. So this is what I do when I go to the field to do my RCTs. The part that I enjoy the most is to talk with them before I design the RCTs I actually end up designing. So I talk with the small entrepreneurs, with informal workers, with refugees, with families navigating unstable income or traumatic lives. I learn a lot from them, so I prefer to talk with them, and they shape my thinking. And most of my research is basically inspired by these talks.
So you mentioned your RCTs. So you've had RCT experience in Kenya, India, Uganda. Do you incorporate these research insights into your curriculum? And do you think that incorporating this could help students grasp theoretical concepts like RCTs or econometrics like much better?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, I do incorporate them. Of course, the syllabus is not about my work, but how I incorporate them is through kind of share experiences I have whenever. I think I tell them how the sausage is made rather than let's study the sausage itself. And the students love it because I can tell them about my failures. I can tell them why some RCTs failed. you read a paper and you see that everything looks like perfect, and it's like 6 years or 7 years of work from the beginning of the idea until you actually publish that paper. So you tell them a little about this story, and I think they help them engaging with the papers they have to read. Some actually have to read, they read my papers because I include it in syllabus, but it's just, for example, the paper on aspiration and poverty is a theoretical paper. I teach in the bachelor in economics second year, and you would think that it's difficult for them, but of course, since it is my own work, I can tell them exactly why some assumptions were there. So how I came up with the assumptions, how I came up with the proof, why I wanted to prove this. So, and I relate the paper with what motivated me to study that. So of course they can see a theoretical, maybe complex model, but in the lights of someone who actually was working on that, I can put on their shoes and try to kind of help them digest the model, at least the intuition behind the assumptions and the proofs even, for a second year bachelor student.
Mm.
And I think they like that as well.
Do you encourage students to engage with research, and do you have any specific exercises or techniques that would make it more accessible so they don't get caught up in the whole theoretical part they might not understand,
Yeah.
especially for a second year bachelor's?
Yeah, for a second year bachelor is yes. What I do is they have to prepare presentations of seminal economic papers. So I teach by topic, and so each topic has a seminar. I choose one seminal economic paper. Of course, there are econometricas, ARs, UGEs, and of course, some sections are very challenging for a second year bachelor student. What I do is skip that section, typical structural section, or some theoretical model. And what I do is to provide them the first 4 lectures, all the knowledge they should have to be able to read an empirical paper on development economics, basically RCTs and all the methods about RCTs, how to analyze data, and also the tutors actually go through the papers as well with them. So first they have to give kind of a mock presentation to the tutors, and the tutor help them to kind of polish the presentation. Because the worst that can happen is that the students don't understand the paper. They have to explain to the peers don't understand what they're saying. So to avoid that, there is a kind of first meeting with the tutor before the actual presentation, and the tutor help them to navigate through the slides, etc. And then the tutor itself is going to spend 30 minutes in the tutorials to go through the most technical aspects of that paper. Things that we haven't covered in the first 4 lectures of methods. I don't know. There is a paper that uses very special techniques to identify spillovers, general equilibrium effects. Well, okay, let's go through them together with the tutor. You see? So basically the gaps that are not, that are not fulfilled in the 4 first lectures are kind of closed in the tutorial. And the most important thing is that they are able to explain an academic paper to their peers. So I think this is a knowledge that that I want them to have, because once you are able to explain a difficult concept to someone else, is what to me is that it shows that you understand the concept.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you see in economics education today, and what's something that can be done to tackle them?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think the most important challenge that I see is a little bit of disengagement with I'm not sure about if it is only about economics, but particularly after COVID, students prefer not to come to the lectures, and they want to have kind of the slides, they want to have the materials, they want to have a study on their own, they want to use maybe ChatGPT or artificial intelligence to help them learn. But I think, it's a challenge that we all have to face, and I think it's our responsibility to bring them back to the lectures. And how we do that is to show them that there is value to be there. And how do we show them there is value to be there? Is by first start with the relevance of the topic. Understand why the topic matters, why you're there, why you're sitting there and trying to understand a particular topic. So all my lectures start with the problem. The problem is relevant, is there, and we need to do something about that. And we are all responsible. Yes, because these students are there. They know they have a privilege. They have a privilege, and they need to have to understand that. The other thing is, well, then we introduce this is a problem. Okay, brings the attention. Great. Of course, there is a problem. There's no solution yet, but economists have been trying to understand that problems. So I tell them how economics has approached the problem and the competing theoretical frameworks, the debates, empirical evidence. So I'm transparent about the kind of the assumptions that are made and try to kind of challenge their thoughts about the different methods that we use. So really connect a big real problem with an abstract kind of conceptual solution and some sort of empirical evidence trying to solve the problem. And I connect also with my own research, my life, my own experience, and I invite students to share their perspectives as well and their experience. So my lectures are dynamics, so it's, and they kind of, we create the thinking together from scratch. So in that way, I think they have a value, because you cannot get that in artificial intelligence. You cannot get this by reading the slides only, So the process in every single lecture is different, and it depends on the interaction with students. Students are different. The process through which we get to the knowledge is different in each lecture. That's why, on purpose, I don't give the slides in advance. Why? Because I want them to, they know the topic, they know the material to read. They can read all the material. I don't mind. But I don't want them to have the bullet points, because of course they will think, okay, I understand this. I don't go to the lectures because, I think I understand. So there's a misperception of what it is actually understanding. So they can have the material, they come to class, and I have the slides in the background. And I'm safe because all the knowledge I want them to have is in the slides. But how we get to the knowledge is using kind of thinking from scratch, using the blackboard, asking them how they would model something, for example. This is a problem, how you would conceptualize in a model. Use Micro 101. What do you know? How can we start? Even when I teach asymmetric information, market of lemons, etc., I develop the model with them from scratch in the lecture room. So that's how I think they get value from coming to the lectures.
I'm also sort of glad you mentioned sort of generative AI. Obviously, it's quite a hot topic in education now. So do you see any particular opportunities or challenges with generative AI being integrated for students? Maybe even in the assessment sense?
Absolutely. Of course, AI is there. We know that they use it. And in fact, I encourage them, for example, to use it when I supervise thesis. I encourage them to use it in a smart way. So I realize when they use it too much. So what I say is, bring your ideas to ChatGPT. Maybe ask them to kind of put these ideas in a flow, in a coherent way. That's fine. Check your English, for example, the grammar. It's better that I understand what they have in mind, that rather than, I cannot understand. And they will use it later on. So why not? It's there. There's no point to avoid that. But of course, for us to evaluate the students, we need to be able to identify what is their knowledge and what is the knowledge of the IA. So for that, I think we need to reassess the way we evaluate students. And this is what I'm doing. For example, we have these group presentations, and there is no artificial intelligence there. They have to be there. There's more, of course, in-class assessments. I use quizzes in classroom. I use just, of course, typical exams, and less of home assignments. And if there are home assignments, the evaluation must be might be in some sort of oral presentation in which you can actually see whether the person is understanding what they are they are presenting rather than, just using what the ChatGPT told them to.
So would you say your policy has been more towards shifting to maybe traditional exams or going to in-class assessments rather than sort of maybe trying to incorporate AI into assessments and maybe that's a factor that evaluates students, how well students can use AI to help them. What's your thoughts on something like that?
Exactly. So that there are different views. My view is more simplistic in a way, and I always try to bring kind of the human interaction in teaching. So I would prefer like in the way I see teaching is not, I don't tend to innovate so much in terms of technology, but I tend to kind of, maybe we should kind of rethink about the old-fashioned type of teaching in which we try to, we know that the students will use AI outside the classroom. Let's bring the students without AI. Don't use the computer, and let's try to interact. In the classroom. Let's use this classroom for what they don't do outside the classroom, which is interacting with artificial intelligence. Let's try to kind of encourage this kind of human interaction. Um, and I think it's not an innovation on itself because it's using the standard old-fashioned way of teaching, but I think, it is innovative in the sense that, it centers the classroom as a space of discovery and live reasoning rather than trying to use AI. So it's a completely different. So we can use both complementary, and maybe it's more old-fashioned, but in today's kind of context, it may be an innovation.
Um, I mean, have you found, so we talked about attendance being a big problem, especially post-COVID. Have you found any ways to, again, you mentioned lecture slides, not posting lecture slides early, but have you found ways in lecture to make them more engaging and especially for more challenging theoretical topics, have you found any techniques to make it more engaging in the actual lecture?
That's exactly, in the way that that's my innovation, like make them interactive and exploratory. So it's a conversation. So and that adds to, I hope it adds value. Typically in my lectures, I have very good attendance, but I am also chair of education committees, and I see that there are many professors who are struggling with that. That's why I mentioned this. And of course, I think we need to think the way we actually add value by being in the lecture. So we need the students to value coming to the lecture, not because it is required, but because it's where the learning really happens. That's what they need to, and I think my students understand that. However, I have to be realistic. It works most of the time, but not always. So this is no magic. And if we have a cohort of students, which has happened to me, that came mostly because they need a diploma and they are not interested in the topic because maybe the course is not the right course for their own program. It has happened. So for example, I was teaching business students with this whole idea, and they were not interested in what I was saying. Even though I was trying to engage them in trying to tell them how important is that we think about these problems, they were looking at me, they were not finding it important. So of course, you have to teach the right students. You need a little bit of kind of intrinsic motivation from the students, and then this interactive and exploratory type of classroom experience will work.
So how has your teaching style evolved since you first became a professor? Do you have any tips you'd give as aspiring educators to develop their own teaching style?
Yeah, before I became lecturing even when I was a bachelor student. I was lecturing trade, and I was so scared to death because I was the best student there in the trade course, but I didn't know more than what I had studied for the course. So really, I was studied the whole much more than what I needed. So basically, I overly prepared, and I was very nervous. So I understand if you when you start teaching, you may be nervous, and I think what the first thing you have to think is that you know more than the students typically, and you have to be kind of course, humble about that, but also gives you confidence that you know some questions you may not know, and it's good to say, sorry, I don't know, and I will check for you. This is a great question. Uh, and other questions, most of the time, you will know. The other thing is that, of course, the more experience you get, the more you realize um, how you can actually be able to explain a difficult concept to bachelor students, for example, and to put in their shoes. I think it's essential for any teacher to remember how difficult some concepts were when you were studying as well. And I think, having this empathy and, is essential. When a student that, when most of the students don't understand a topic, is the failure of the teacher, not of the student. It's either you're teaching something that is too complicated, but even if it is too complicated, you can always, explain an intuition behind that. So I think teachers sometimes tend to think that, well, students are not well prepared, they don't come well prepared in math from high school, etc. Well, it's our, we have to take that as given, and we have to make our best to kind of bring the concept to the ground, to their own level, and being able to explain in a way that they can get motivated by the topic. Of course, if they don't understand, they will not get motivated. So that's an essential necessary condition. Yes. So that's my point. And one advice to the new teachers, and also to the old teachers, is that to realize that we are doing something impactful, that we can be inspirational to someone, and that's something that is more difficult to do with research. And if we manage to inspire someone with one paper, it's great, but it will be another researcher. But students, we may inspire more people. We may inspire people to do things that to think about the problems of the world, and we need more and more of these people. So spend time in your teaching, because it's the most rewarding activity that an academic does, at least in my opinion. It's not so much rewarded nowadays. Research gets more weight, but I think you can do both. They are not substitutes.
Do you think there's any underrepresented perspectives or methods that you think should be integrated into economics curriculum, maybe even at the undergraduate level or further on?
Yeah. So I think, for example, logic. Logic is something that I don't know. I used to have in my bachelor course, but I don't see, at least in Tilburg, used to be there, but it was taught by someone who was not an economist. I think we need someone who knows economics and can actually always bring examples from economics to logic. Logic is essential for life. Everybody should know logic to argue, and to reasoning, and also not to fail into fake promises by maybe politicians or so I think it's important. The other thing is, of course, economic history is not so much taught, and I think it's important to learn from history to understand the present. And maybe political economy is a little bit, I think we need to teach more. I think it's essential that people understand how economy and politics are very much connected to each other. Yes, so these are the three courses that I would add to a standard bachelor in economics.
So we talked about the two sides of being a researcher and an educator. So in that balance, how does being a researcher inform teaching? And, are there specific insights that you can bring into research, and how would you bring those into the classroom?
How to bring research into the classroom?
Yeah, like current research.
Yeah, exactly. My current research. One way, for example, is in development economics, so the type of research I'm doing, there is no book on that, etc. So basically, bring papers, of course, and some of your papers you could bring. As I told you, for example, my paper on aspirations and poverty is pure theoretical model. You say you are crazy to bring a theoretical model to second year bachelor students, which only have, maybe micro one or two, level. But yes, you can bring any research you do as long as you are able to put it uh, at the level of knowledge that the bachelor student has. So what I do is, okay, I know what you have studied in micro one and also micro two. Okay, let's start from here. And now we want to understand this particular thing. Do we have enough resources or not to understand? Do we have the knowledge? What else do we need to know? And this is exactly, I build from the knowledge that they have. And again, it takes me, for example, 1 hour and a half, but I'm able to show them a paper that is, requires much more knowledge. And the things that, of course, Tarski fixed point theorem, they shouldn't know that, but I can explain the intuition. I think we can all explain intuition. I think bringing your own research is great because you can explain, again, when it failed, why and how you managed to kind of prove this, and how on earth you came up with this question. It's great.
Are you seeing any specific trends in economic education? Do you is there anything you'd like to share with the future of economics education in general?
I think, well, I can talk about Tilburg. What I see that students are getting much more data science, so they are learning much more, machine learning, which is great. Big data. So they have a minor on that. I think this is the artificial intelligence. I think economics is. We know that even in the last 2-3 decades, it became more kind of an interdisciplinary science. So we use psychology, sociology, anthropologies in our research, and now we are using artificial intelligence. And yes, so what I see is that more and more these programs in economics are building more interdisciplinary aspects into it. So we have minor in also psychology and economics, minor in law and economics, and data science and economics. And more you become a social scientist using the particular methods that we use in economics, which is models and formal models and rigorous empirical research, quantitative research.
So, as an ending note, do you have any final advice or something like you'd like to share with our audience?
My advice is that I typically don't give advice uh, because I don't know. Everyone has their own trajectories. Um, if I have to say something, it's just see the relevance on teaching, because that's my own advice in terms of many times I speak with colleagues and say, oh no, I have to teach. I have to teach. It's like a burden, I have to teach. When you have motivated students that go and come from different parts of the world to listen to you and to also learn from you about something that they are interested in, is great. I think you have to kind of let yourself enjoy teaching, prepare yourself for this journey, and be ready to be you know inspiring and also challenged by students.
That was amazing. Thank you so much for doing this and joining us today, Patricio. Thank you.